The grand chamber of the Valtharian Confederacy hummed with a silence more profound and more terrifying than any battle cry. Crystalline structures, grown over millennia from the very bedrock of their homeworld, pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, casting long, wavering shadows across the assembled delegates. Each shadow seemed to writhe with the unspoken anxieties that permeated the air, a collective tension that thickened the atmosphere until it was almost difficult to breathe. At the heart of this cavernous space, a holographic representation of the galactic arm shimmered, a swirling river of stars and nebulae. Pinpointed within that cosmic map, a cluster of icons blinked with a distress signal that had echoed through the halls of power for what felt like an eternity. It was a fleet, a significant portion of their exploration and defense force, rendered inert and adrift in the treacherous gravimetric currents of the Seraphim Nebula. The nebula itself was a cosmic graveyard, a place where stars were born and died with violent, unpredictable fury, and where compasses, both technological and instinctual, failed. To be stranded, there was a death sentence, a slow, agonizing descent into oblivion as life support dwindled, and the very fabric of their vessels was slowly unraveled by the harsh realities of space. For cycles, the Confederacy had debated, their discussions a maelstrom of strategic calculations, resource allocation, and political maneuvering. The greatest minds of their species, the most seasoned fleet commanders, and the most astute diplomats had all converged upon this single, intractable problem. Rescue was deemed impossible. The gravimetric shearing within the nebula was too severe, the energy expenditure required to punch through its chaotic veil too vast. Any vessel sent to aid their stranded brethren would almost certainly meet the same fate, compounding the tragedy and weakening the Confederacy at a time when its borders were already strained by the encroaching ambitions of rival empires. The consensus, a bitter pill to swallow, was that the fleet was lost. A memorial had been commissioned, a day of mourning declared, and the silent, agonizing work of accepting the inevitable had begun. The blinking icons on the star map were no longer a call for help, but a tombstone, a constant, glowing reminder of their limitations, of the universe's cold, indifferent cruelty. It was a wound in their collective psyche, a failure that would be recorded in their histories and sung in their dirges for generations to come. Then the humans had arrived. Their appearance was as sudden as it was inexplicable. A flotilla of their vessels, starkly utilitarian and blocky in design compared to the elegant, sweeping lines of Valtharian ships, had emerged from the void at the nebula's edge. They did not hail the Confederacy. They did not transmit any declarations of intent or offer any explanation for their presence. They simply waited. Their ships, silent and dark, hung in the blackness like patient predators, their forms silhouetted against the swirling, incandescent gases of the Seraphim Nebula. This silent vigil was, in many ways, more unnerving than an overt act of aggression. The humans were a relatively new species on the galactic stage, their expansion rapid and their motives opaque. They were known for their strange, often contradictory behavior. They were capable of acts of breathtaking compassion and shocking brutality. Their technology was a bizarre amalgamation of brute force engineering and elegant, almost artistic, theoretical physics. They were an enigma, a puzzle that the ancient, established races of the galaxy had yet to solve. And now, they were here at the site of the Confederacy's greatest tragedy, their silence a blank canvas upon which the Valtharian delegates painted their deepest fears. High Counselor Veridia, her carapace the color of polished obsidian and her multifaceted eyes reflecting the myriad lights of the chamber, raised a slender, three-fingered hand, calling for silence, though the chamber was already deathly quiet. Her voice, when it came, was a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air. "Human presence remains unchanged," she stated, her words devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the roiling currents of fear and suspicion that flowed through the assembled delegates. "They have maintained their position at the edge of the nebula for several rotations. They have not responded to our hails. They have not crossed into the nebula's gravimetric field. They simply observe." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle upon the chamber. "The question before us is not what they are doing, but why. What is their purpose in this silent spectacle? Are they scavengers, waiting for our ships to finally succumb so they can pick over the wreckage? Are they studying our technology, our methods of dealing with catastrophe, for their own military or strategic advantage, or is this something else entirely? A silent judgment, a mocking tribute to our failure." A wave of murmurs rippled through the delegates. The theories Veridia had articulated were the same ones that had been whispered in the darkened corridors of the Citadel for days. The humans were a species that seemed to revel in the unconventional, their actions often defying the logical frameworks that governed the behavior of the older races. To the Valtharian mind, which prized order, tradition, and clarity above all else, the humans were a chaotic, unpredictable force, and their current behavior was a perfect and terrifying example of that chaos. They were a variable in an already impossible equation, and the uncertainty they introduced was a potent poison. The fear was that this was a precursor to something far more sinister, a quiet prelude to an act of aggression or exploitation. The Confederacy was in a position of weakness, their grief a raw, open wound, and the humans, with their inscrutable motives and their silent, watching ships, seemed poised to pour salt into it. Delegate Kalen, a veteran of several border conflicts and a known skeptic of the newer species, rose to his feet, his own carapace a mottled gray, scarred by the rigors of a long and storied career. His voice was a harsh rasp, a stark contrast to Viridia's measured tones. "They are vultures," he declared, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "They circle our dying, waiting for the moment of finality. They have seen our weakness, our inability to save our own, and they have come to witness our shame. Perhaps they intend to claim the wreckage, to reverse engineer our technology from the cold, dead hulls of our ships. Or perhaps their motives are even darker. Perhaps they see our failure as an opportunity, a sign that the Valtharian Confederacy is no longer the power it once was. Their silence is not a sign of respect or contemplation. It is the silence of a predator, assessing its prey before the strike." Kalen's words resonated with a significant portion of the assembly. The humans were known to be pragmatic, their ethics often seeming to be situational rather than absolute. The idea that they would exploit such a tragedy for their own gain was not only plausible, it was, to many, the most likely explanation. Another delegate, a philosopher-diplomat named Lyra, whose carapace was a shimmering, iridescent blue, offered a different perspective. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that commanded attention. "Or perhaps," she began, her multifaceted eyes scanning the faces of her colleagues, "we are projecting our own fears, our own cultural paradigms, onto a species we do not understand. We see their silence as a threat because, in our own culture, such a silence would be a prelude to hostility. But what if, for the humans, silence is something else entirely? What if it is a sign of respect, a form of mourning? We know so little of their customs, their philosophies. To assume the worst is to fall into the trap of xenophobia, to let our fear blind us to other possibilities." Lyra's words were a gentle current against the tide of suspicion, but they were not enough to quell the growing sense of unease. The Confederacy was a civilization built on millennia of tradition and established protocols. The humans, with their disregard for such things, were a source of constant frustration and anxiety. Their unpredictability was a form of power, a psychological weapon that kept the older races off balance, and in this moment of crisis, that power was being wielded with devastating effect. The debate raged on, a torrent of fear, speculation, and political posturing. The blinking icons of the stranded fleet on the holographic map seemed to pulse in time with the rising tension in the chamber. Each blink was a reminder of the lives hanging in the balance, of the families waiting for word, of the slow, inexorable march of time in the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. The Valtharian people were watching, their collective grief a heavy shroud that enveloped the citadel. They looked to their leaders for answers, for hope, for a path through the darkness. But the leaders, for all their wisdom and experience, were as lost as the fleet they mourned. They were trapped in a cycle of their own making, their fear of the unknown paralyzing them, their pride preventing them from considering the possibility that help might come from the most unexpected of quarters. The human ships remained, a silent, inscrutable presence, their dark hulls a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic beauty of the nebula behind them. They were a question mark hanging in the void, and the answer, whatever it was, held the power to either shatter the Valtharian Confederacy or to change the very course of galactic history. The silence from the human fleet was not empty. It was filled with the weight of expectation, with the echoes of a decision that had not yet been made. A decision that would ripple through the stars and redefine the meaning of life, loss, and the vast, terrifying, and beautiful emptiness in between. As the cycles turned, the human presence became a new kind of normal, a constant, unsettling feature of the Seraphim Nebula. The initial panic within the Valtharian Confederacy had subsided into a low, simmering anxiety. The human ships, a silent, unmoving flotilla, had become a subject of intense, almost obsessive study. Every sensor array, every deep space telescope, every long-range listening post was trained on their position, a silent vigil mirroring the human's own. The data that poured in was as voluminous as it was unenlightening. The human ships emitted no unusual energy signatures. They launched no probes. They engaged in no discernible activity. They were, for all intents and purposes, a collection of inert objects, indistinguishable from the countless asteroids and celestial debris that littered the edge of the nebula. This very inactivity was what made them so profoundly disturbing. It was a deliberate, calculated stillness, a form of communication that the Valtarians, with their rich and complex language of gestures, pheromones, and vocalizations, could not decipher. The stranded fleet in the meantime was dying. The reports that trickled out of the nebula, distorted and fragmented by the gravimetric interference, painted a grim picture. Life support systems were failing, one by one. The fleet's energy reserves were critically low. The crews, once proud and disciplined, were now consumed by a quiet, gnawing despair. They were adrift in a cosmic ocean, their ships their coffins, the beautiful, swirling gases of the nebula the last thing they would ever see. The Confederacy listened to their final, heartbreaking messages, their voices strained with a mixture of courage and resignation, and they mourned. The memorial that had been commissioned was now being carved, its polished stone a testament to a loss that was felt in every corner of their vast, star-spanning civilization. The names of the dead, or soon-to-be dead, were being inscribed, a litany of heroes who had been sacrificed on the altar of the impossible. It was during one of the endless, circular debates in the Grand Chamber that the first message from the humans arrived. It was not a grand, sweeping declaration. It was not a demand for tribute or a threat of war. It was a simple, unadorned text transmission, translated into the Valtarians' own complex, multi-layered language with a fluency that was both impressive and unsettling. The message was displayed on the main holographic screen, its stark black letters a stark contrast to the swirling colors of the galactic map behind it. It read, "We have observed your stranded fleet. We have analyzed the gravimetric shearing within the Seraphim Nebula. We have calculated the energy expenditure required for a stable transit. We are prepared to offer assistance. We await your consent." The message was signed simply, Humanity. A stunned silence descended upon the chamber. The delegates stared at the message, their multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. The message was so human. It was direct, efficient, and devoid of the elaborate honorifics and oral flourishes that were the hallmarks of Valtarian diplomatic communication. It was the language of engineers and technicians, not of diplomats and poets. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of capability, and an offer of help, all stripped down to their bare, essential components. For a long moment no one spoke. The implications of the message were too vast, too paradigm-shifting to be immediately processed. The humans, the silent, inscrutable watchers, were not vultures. They were not mocking them. They were offering to help. Kalen, the grizzled veteran, was the first to break the silence. His voice was a low growl laced with suspicion. "A trick," he declared, his gaze fixed on the message as if it were a venomous serpent. "This is a trick. They cannot possibly have a solution to the gravimetric shearing. Our finest minds, our most advanced technology have deemed it impossible. They are luring us into a trap. They will demand a price for this assistance, a price that will cripple the Confederacy for generations. They will ask for territory, for technology, for a seat on this very council. This is not an act of altruism. It is a power play, a cleverly disguised act of extortion." Kalen's words found purchase in the fertile ground of the delegates' fear and mistrust. The humans' offer seemed too good to be true, a sudden, miraculous solution to a problem that had been deemed unsolvable. It was a classic tactic of the cunning and the ambitious, to offer a lifeline to the drowning, only to demand their soul in return. Lyra, the philosopher-diplomat, countered him, her voice a calm, steadying presence in the turbulent chamber. "And what if it is not a trick?" she asked, her iridescent carapace shimmering in the soft light. "What if they have, in their own strange, unorthodox way, found a solution? We have underestimated them from the beginning. We have judged them by our own standards, our own limitations. We have seen their silence as a threat, their stillness as a prelude to aggression. What if we have been wrong? What if their silence was not a judgment, but a period of observation, of calculation? What if they were not watching us fail, but studying the problem, formulating a solution? To reject their offer out of fear and pride would be to condemn our own people to a slow, certain death. Is our mistrust of the unknown so great that we would sacrifice our own for it?" The debate that followed was even more ferocious than the ones that had preceded it. The chamber was divided, a schism running through the very heart of the Confederacy. On one side were those who, like Kalen, saw the human offer as a Trojan horse, a dangerous gamble that could have catastrophic consequences. On the other were those who, like Lyra, saw it as a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a chance, however slim, to avert a tragedy. The blinking icons of the stranded fleet seemed to pulse with a renewed urgency, a silent, desperate plea for a decision. The lives of thousands hung in the balance, their fate to be decided not by the laws of physics or the cold indifference of the universe, but by the hopes and fears of a room full of politicians and diplomats, light years away. In the end, it was High Counselor Veridia who made the final decision. She listened to all the arguments, her face a mask of serene composure, her multifaceted eyes betraying none of the turmoil that must have been raging within her. When she finally spoke, her voice was a clear, unwavering bell that cut through the cacophony of the debate. "We will accept their offer," she declared, her words echoing with the weight of history. "We will grant them our consent, but we will do so with our eyes open. We will monitor their every move. We will be prepared for any eventuality. We have assumed the worst of the humans, and in doing so, we have revealed more about ourselves than we have about them. We have let our fear dictate our actions, and it has led us to the brink of despair. Now we will choose a different path. We will choose hope. We will choose to believe, if only for a moment, that we are not alone in this vast, cold universe, and we will pray that our faith is not misplaced." The message was sent, a single encoded pulse of light that shot across the void to the silent human flotilla. The Confederacy held its collective breath, the entire civilization poised on the precipice of an unknown future. The human response was almost instantaneous. A single word, translated once again into their own language with perfect, unnerving accuracy, appeared on the holographic screen. It read, "Understood." And then something extraordinary happened. The human ships, which had been dark and inert for so long, came to life. A soft, blue-white light emanated from their hulls, a gentle, pulsing glow that seemed to push back the darkness of the void. And from the lead ship, a vessel larger and more angular than the others, a single, impossibly thin beam of light shot out, not at the stranded fleet, but at the nebula itself. The beam was not a weapon. It did not burn or destroy. It was something else entirely, something the Valtarians, with all their advanced science and their millennia of technological development, had never conceived of. The beam struck the swirling, chaotic gases of the nebula, and where it touched, the chaos subsided. The gravimetric shearing, the violent, unpredictable currents that had made the nebula a death trap, began to calm. The beam moved slowly and deliberately, painting a path through the nebula, a calm, stable corridor through the heart of the storm. It was as if the humans were not fighting the nebula, but reasoning with it, persuading it to yield, to open a path for the lost and the dying. The Valtarians watched, their sensors and their own eyes confirming what their minds could barely comprehend. The humans were not breaking the laws of physics. They were rewriting them. The corridor of calm, a shimmering, ethereal tunnel through the heart of the Seraphim Nebula, held steady. The human ships, their hulls still glowing with that soft, blue-white light, maintained their position, their single, focused beam of energy holding the chaotic forces of the nebula at bay. It was a feat of engineering, of scientific understanding, that was beyond anything the Valtarian Confederacy had ever imagined. It was not a weapon, not a tool of brute force, but something far more subtle, more elegant. It was a key, a finely tuned instrument that could unlock the very secrets of the universe, a testament to a level of technological and philosophical mastery that was both awe-inspiring and deeply humbling. The Grand CH. Amber was silent, the delegates staring at the holographic display, their earlier debates, their fears and suspicions, now seeming petty and insignificant in the face of this quiet, breathtaking display of power. A new message from the humans appeared on the screen, as concise and as unadorned as the first. "The path is stable. It will remain open for a limited time. We recommend you begin evacuation procedures immediately." There was no hint of arrogance in the message, no gloating over their superior technology. It was a simple, practical instruction, the kind of communication one would expect from a rescue worker, a professional who was focused on the task at hand. Their own incredible abilities a secondary consideration to the lives that needed to be saved. The Valtarians, who had been prepared for a list of demands, for a bill to be presented, were once again caught off guard by the humans' straightforward, almost detached altruism. The Confederacy moved with a speed and efficiency born of desperation and renewed hope. Their own rescue vessels, which had been on standby, their crews resigned to a mission of recovery rather than rescue, were scrambled. They plunged into the shimmering corridor created by the humans, their sensors confirming what their eyes could see. The gravimetric shearing was gone, the turbulent currents of the nebula reduced to a gentle, harmless swell. They reached the stranded fleet, their ships battered and scarred, their crews on the brink of exhaustion but alive. The evacuation was a frantic, yet orderly, affair. The survivors, their faces a mixture of disbelief and profound gratitude, were transferred to the rescue ships. They looked back at their crippled vessels, their homes and their workplaces, now little more than floating tombs, and then they looked at the human ships, the silent, glowing saviors at the edge of the nebula, and they understood that they were witnessing something that would be spoken of for generations. As the last of the survivors were evacuated, the human ships began to move. The beam of light that had held the nebula at bay retracted, and the corridor of calm collapsed back into its natural state of chaotic, beautiful violence. The human flotilla, their hulls now dark once more, turned, and without a word, without a single transmission, they began to move away, their engines leaving faint, ethereal trails in the blackness of space. They had come, they had performed a miracle, and now they were leaving, their task complete, their motives still, in many ways, a mystery. High Counselor Veridia, her voice filled with an emotion that the chamber had never heard from her before, a mixture of awe and profound humility, ordered a communication to be sent to the departing human fleet. On behalf of the Valterian Confederacy, the message read, its language now infused with a genuine, heartfelt gratitude that had been absent before. We offer our deepest, most sincere thanks. You have saved the lives of our people. You have demonstrated a compassion and a technological mastery that is beyond our comprehension. We are in your debt. We ask that you tell us what we can offer in return. We will give you anything you ask. The reply from the humans was, once again, almost instantaneous. It was the longest message they had yet sent, and its contents would be debated and analyzed by Valterian philosophers and historians for centuries to come. It appeared on the screen, a simple, elegant statement that cut to the very heart of the human enigma. We require no payment. We ask for nothing in return. We saw a people in need, and we had the ability to help. It is our belief that the right to exist is not a privilege to be earned, but a fundamental principle of the universe. We do not see life as a commodity to be traded or a resource to be exploited. We see it as a rare and precious thing, a fleeting spark of consciousness in the vast, cold darkness. To preserve that spark, to nurture it, to protect it from the indifference of the void, is not a burden. It is an honor. It is the core of what it means to be human. The message continued, its words weaving a philosophical tapestry that was as beautiful as it was alien to the Valterian way of thinking. We understand that our methods may seem strange to you. Our silence was not born of arrogance or contempt. It was born of respect. We did not wish to offer false hope, to make promises that we could not keep. So we waited and we studied and we worked until we were certain that we had a solution. And we did not wish to impose our presence upon your grief, to intrude upon a moment of profound cultural and personal loss. So we kept our distance, and we waited for you to ask for our help. We believe that true strength is not found in the exercise of power, but in the wisdom to know when and how to use it. And we believe that the greatest power of all is the power to choose compassion over self-interest, to choose to build ridges rather than walls. The final part of the message was a simple yet profound statement of their own deeply held philosophy. We are a young species by the standards of the galaxy. We have made many mistakes. We have known war and hatred and despair. We have looked into the abyss of our own making, and we have seen the darkness that lies within our own hearts. But we have also seen the light. We have seen the capacity for love, for sacrifice, for boundless, irrational, and beautiful hope. And we have chosen to follow that light. We are not gods. We are not saviors. We are simply human. And we hope that in time you will come to understand what that means. We wish you peace. We wish you a future filled with discovery and wonder, and we hope that the next time our paths cross, it will be as friends. The message ended, and the human ships, now distant specks of light, vanished into the infinite blackness of space. A profound, contemplative silence descended upon the grand chamber. The delegates, the warriors, the politicians, the philosophers all stood in quiet reverence, their minds reeling from the implications of what they had just witnessed. They had been so wrong. They had seen the humans as a threat, as a rival, as a chaotic, unpredictable force to be feared and contained. But they were something else entirely. They were a species that had looked into the darkness of the universe and had chosen to light a candle rather than curse the dark. They were a species that had achieved a level of technological and spiritual evolution that the Valterians, for all their ancient wisdom and their long and storied history, had not yet even begun to comprehend. Lyra, the philosopher-diplomat, was the one to finally break the silence. Her voice was soft, filled with a sense of wonder that was shared by everyone in the chamber. "They were not vultures," she whispered, her words a quiet benediction. "They were guardians." The relationship between the Valterian Confederacy and humanity was transformed overnight. The initial fear and suspicion were replaced by a deep and abiding respect, a sense of awe that bordered on reverence. The Valterians, a proud and ancient race, found themselves in the unfamiliar position of being the students, their millennia of tradition and accumulated knowledge suddenly seeming small and incomplete in the face of humanity's quiet, profound wisdom. They began a dialogue, a slow, careful exchange of ideas and philosophies. The humans, for their part, were patient and open, sharing their knowledge freely without any expectation of reward. They explained the principles behind their gravimetric technology, a complex and beautiful fusion of physics, and a philosophical understanding of the interconnectedness of the universe that the Valterians were only just beginning to grasp. They shared their art, their music, their literature, a vast and vibrant tapestry of a species that had experienced the full spectrum of existence, from the lowest depths of depravity to the highest peaks of transcendence. The Valterians learned that humanity's seemingly contradictory nature was not a flaw, but their greatest strength. Their capacity for both great good and great evil had forced them to confront the fundamental questions of existence, to grapple with the complexities of morality and ethics, in a way that the more homogeneous, more stable, older races had never had to. They were a species forged in the crucible of chaos, and they had emerged not broken, but tempered, their spirit as strong and as resilient as the strange, utilitarian alloys from which they built their ships. They were a species of philosophers and engineers, of poets and warriors, of dreamers and pragmatists, and it was this very diversity, this internal tension, that gave them their unique perspective on the universe. As the two species grew closer, as the bonds of friendship and mutual respect were forged, the humans revealed more of their own, carefully guarded history. They spoke of a time when their own world had been on the brink of collapse, when they had been a species divided, their own worst enemy. They spoke of a great cataclysmic war, a conflict that had engulfed their entire planet and had almost driven them to extinction. They had survived, but they had been changed. They had been forced to look at themselves, at their own capacity for self-destruction, and they had made a choice. They had chosen to be better. They had chosen to dedicate themselves to the preservation of life, to the pursuit of knowledge, to the idea that the universe was not a battleground to be conquered, but a garden to be cultivated. This was the origin of their prime directive, a complex and nuanced ethical framework that guided their interactions with other species. It was not a rigid set of rules, but a living, breathing philosophy, a constant reminder of their own past, a promise to themselves and to the universe that they would never aga. Allow the darkness to consume them. It was during one of these deep philosophical exchanges, a conversation between High Counselor Veridia and a human ambassador, a woman with a quiet, unassuming demeanor and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, that the final and most profound revelation occurred. They were discussing the nature of existence, the origins of life, the great unanswered questions that had haunted sentient beings since the dawn of time. Veridia, emboldened by the growing trust between their two species, asked the ambassador about a strange, persistent energy signature that Valterian astronomers had been detecting for centuries. It was a faint, almost imperceptible signal, emanating from the deepest, darkest reaches of intergalactic space, a region of the universe that was thought to be completely devoid of life. It was a signal that seemed to defy all known laws of physics, a whisper from the void that no one had ever been able to decipher. The human ambassador listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When Veridia had finished, she was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant, as if she were looking at something far beyond the walls of the chamber. Then she leaned forward, her voice a low, confidential whisper. "We are aware of the signal," she said, her words sending a shiver down Veridia's carapace. "We have been studying it for a very long time. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is a message, a warning." She projected a holographic image into the center of the room. It was a complex, multi-layered data stream, a swirling vortex of information that was far beyond the Valterians' ability to comprehend. But the ambassador, with a few deft gestures, simplified the image, isolating a single, repeating pattern within the chaotic stream of data. It was a message translated not into language, but into the universal language of mathematics and physics. It was a map, a timeline, and a prophecy. "The signal is ancient," the ambassador explained, her voice grave. It predates our own species. It predates your species. It may predate this very galaxy. It tells the story of a universe that was once teeming with life, with countless civilizations, each one unique and beautiful. And it tells the story of how they were all destroyed. The holographic image shifted, showing a series of simulations based on the data from the signal. It showed galaxies being consumed, stars being extinguished, entire civilizations being wiped out, not by war or by natural disaster, but by something else, something that was vast and cold and utterly relentless. It was a force of nature, a cosmic entity that moved through the universe like a plague, its only purpose to consume, to erase, to reduce everything to a state of perfect, silent, and eternal entropy. "We do not know what it is," the ambassador continued, her voice now barely a whisper. "The signal calls it the silence. It is a force that is inimical to life, to consciousness, to the very concept of existence. It is the universe's own self-correcting mechanism, a way of returning everything to the void from which it came. And it is coming. The signal is a warning sent by the last of the ancient civilizations, a final, desperate act of defiance before they too were consumed. It is a message in a bottle, thrown into the cosmic ocean, a plea to those who would come after them to be prepared, to stand together, to not make the same mistakes they did." Veridia stared at the holographic image, at the simulated destruction of countless worlds, her mind struggling to grasp the sheer unimaginable scale of the threat. The problems that had once seemed so monumental, the political squabbles, the border disputes, the fear of the unknown, all of it now seemed so small, so insignificant in the face of this cosmic horror. "Why," Veridia asked, her voice trembling, "why did you not tell us? Why did you keep this a secret?" The ambassador looked at her, her eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. "Because you were not ready," she said softly. "Because you were a species divided, consumed by your own fears, your own prejudices. To tell you of the silence then would have been to give you a death sentence. You would have turned on each other, you would have succumbed to despair, you would have been consumed by the very darkness that you were meant to fight. We had to wait. We had to wait for you to be ready to listen. We had to wait for you to see that you were not alone, that there was hope, that there was a better way." She paused, her gaze meeting Veridia's. "The incident with your fleet, it was a test for you and a test for us. It was a chance for you to overcome your fear of the unknown and a chance for us to prove that we were worthy of your trust. You passed your test, and now the real work begins." The ambassador stood, her small, frail form suddenly seeming to possess an immense, unshakable strength. "The silence is coming," she said, her voice now ringing with a quiet, determined conviction. "But this time the universe will not be silent. This time we will be ready. This time we will stand together. Not as humans and Valterians, but as living beings, as children of the stars, united against the coming dark. The ancient ones were alone, we are not, and that High Counselor will make all the difference." The holographic image of the dying galaxies faded, replaced by the familiar, comforting sight of the swirling, star-filled arm of their own galaxy. But it was no longer the same. The stars no longer seemed like cold, distant points of light. They were campfires in the darkness, each one a potential ally, a fellow traveler on the long, uncertain road ahead. The universe, which had once seemed so vast and so empty, was now filled with a new and terrible purpose. The future was no longer a matter of exploration and discovery. It was a matter of survival. Veridia looked at the human ambassador, at this strange, enigmatic being who had come from a distant, unknown world, and she saw not an alien but a kindred spirit, a fellow warrior in a war that had been raging since the beginning of time. She saw a reflection of her own hopes, her own fears, her own unyielding determination to face the darkness and to not be consumed by it. And in that moment, she understood. She understood what it meant to be human. It was not about technology or power or a particular set of customs or beliefs. It was about a choice to stand up, to fight back, to hold the line against the encroaching night, a choice to believe that even the smallest spark of light, of life, of hope was worth fighting for. And as she looked out at the endless, star-dusted expanse of the universe, she knew with a certainty that resonated in the very core of her being that it was a fight they would win. Together. The silence of the void was deep, but the voice of life, united and defiant, would be deeper still.